Getting a US green card can take 10, even 15 years. But in 2025, millions may not get one at all. 7 Asian countries are now on Washington's watch list. Not poor migrants, whole nations, entire populations could lose green card access overnight. From war zones to US allies, you'd never expect. The list is brutal. And number 1 will shock you. It's a country so rich most people thought it was untouchable. Stay with me because what's happening here could decide who gets the American dream and who gets locked out for good. Let's find out. Number 7, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is now under the spotlight. Washington may be preparing to cut its path to the green card in 2025. Why? The country's deep economic collapse. Since 2022, Sri Lanka has battled record inflation, fuel shortages, and political unrest. At one point, food prices rose by over 70% in a single year. That level of crisis pushed thousands to look for a way out. And for many, the United States became the target. But here's the problem. Desperation has fueled fraud. US officials report a surge in fake job offers, forged diplomas, and even false family ties in Sri Lankan applications. In 2024 alone, immigration watchdogs flagged more than 1 in 5 visa submissions for suspicious documentation. That is a huge red flag. From the American side, this is not just about paperwork. Embassies are overwhelmed, background checks are harder, and Sri Lanka's passport has already dropped in global rankings due to instability. Lawmakers in Washington now argue that the security risk outweighs the benefits of keeping green card access wide open. But not everyone agrees. Sri Lankan officials insist that most applicants are genuine students, workers, and families seeking stability. Human rights groups also warn that blanket restrictions could punish honest people for the crimes of a few. They call it collective punishment, not sound policy. Still, the momentum is clear. Under a US Congress already pushing for tighter controls, Sri Lanka could soon find itself on the restricted list. For students planning to study in New York or families waiting to reunite in California, the clock is ticking. Could a collapsing economy at home actually close the American door for an entire generation of Sri Lankans? Stay tuned because the deeper we go down this list, the more surprising it gets. And trust me, wait until you see number 1. It involves a country no one expected. Number 6, Syria. Now we turn to Syria. Few cases are more complicated. And in 2025, Syria's chances of keeping green card access look slim. The reason is no secret: war and collapse. Since 2011, Syria has been torn apart by civil conflict, more than 500,000 lives lost, over 6 million refugees displaced, and nearly every state institution in ruins. For US immigration, this is a nightmare. Applicants cannot provide school records, birth certificates, or even basic employment history. The databases that should confirm identity are gone. American embassies nearby are running at limited capacity and many are shut down completely. That means background checks are almost impossible. And without reliable verification, Washington leans on caution. In fact, congressional hearings in late 2024 included Syria on a short list of countries deemed too unstable for secure vetting. But here comes the clash. Humanitarian groups argue that cutting green card access would abandon families who already suffered more than a decade of war. They say the US has a moral duty to keep doors open, at least for those fleeing violence. Critics call the proposed restrictions a political move that punishes the innocent. Still, lawmakers are unmoved. Their argument is national security. They claim that one forged passport, one missing record could allow dangerous actors to slip through. The pressure is building and Syria may be among the first countries hit by a suspension. Should the US close the door on regular Syrians chasing opportunity just because their country has no functioning government? Number 5, Iran. Iran's place on this list should not surprise anyone. But in 2025, the risk of losing US green card access is higher than ever. The main reason, national security. For decades, Washington and throne have had one of the most hostile relationships in the world. And now, with nuclear talks stalled and new intelligence warnings surfacing, the pressure is reaching a breaking point. On paper, most Iranians applying for US residency are students, engineers, and professionals. In fact, surveys show more than 60% hold advanced degrees. But US officials say isolated cases of visa fraud, asylum abuse, and questionable financial records have cast suspicion on everyone. Even one high-profile case can shift policy, and the system itself adds more problems. There is no American embassy in throne. Every green card applicant must go through third-party countries like Turkey or the UAE. That creates long delays and major verification gaps. Add Iran's internet censorship and tight control of communications, and background checks become even harder. Supporters of the crackdown argue this is about prevention. If Washington cannot verify who someone is, they say the US cannot take the risk. But critics see it differently. Advocacy groups point out that blanket bans hurt ordinary Iranians who want nothing to do with politics. They argue the US should welcome talent, not push it toward Europe or Canada. Still, the momentum in Congress is clear. Security first, family reunifications could be paused. Student-to-residency pathways could be frozen. Even long-term green card lottery entries may face a block. For thousands of peace-seeking Iranians, this would be devastating. Here's the hard question. Could decades of fragile diplomacy collapse not because of war, but because of immigration policy?
Number 4, Pakistan.
Pakistan has always had a complicated relationship with Washington. Cooperation one year, suspicion the next. And in 2025, that uneasy balance could lead to a green card freeze. The biggest reason is visa overstays. U.S. immigration data shows that more than 30,000 Pakistanis overstayed temporary visas in the past 5 years. That number may sound small compared to total arrivals, but for U.S. lawmakers, it signals a troubling pattern. Even a modest spike in violations can trigger policy shifts in an era of strict border control. The second issue is background verification. In many rural areas of Pakistan, record-keeping is inconsistent. Digital databases are limited. That means when an applicant submits documents for employment, education, or even birth records, U.S. authorities struggle to confirm authenticity. For immigration officials in Washington, that uncertainty is a security gap they are less willing to tolerate. But there's also a surge in demand. Political instability and economic struggles have driven thousands more Pakistanis to apply for permanent residency abroad. Family sponsorships, employment, green cards, even lottery applications have risen sharply since 2022. The U.S. system is now under strain. Reactions are mixed. Pakistani-American families fear separation if pathways close. Advocacy groups warned that targeting Pakistan could deepen anti-American sentiment. Yet, U.S. lawmakers argue the opposite, that tighter rules will force accountability and reduce fraud. Here's the dilemma. Should one of America's most strategic partners in South Asia face the same restrictions as countries in open conflict? And keep watching, because the next country, Nepal, might surprise you. It's a peaceful nation on paper, but its rising immigration fraud has U.S. officials sounding the alarm. And wait until you see number 1, an ally nobody expected to land on this list.
Number 3, Nepal.
Nepal may look peaceful on the surface.
No war, no global tensions.
But in 2025, it risks losing access to U.S. green cards for a very different reason: fraud and exploitation. Over the past few years, cases of Nepalis overstaying visas have jumped sharply. Homeland Security reports flagged thousands of overstays from tourist and student visas since 2020. Many of these migrants were coached by unauthorized consultants who promised shortcuts to permanent residency. For Washington, that pattern signals systemic abuse. The second and more alarming issue is human trafficking. Nepal's poverty and political instability have made its citizens vulnerable to fake job offers abroad. U.S. investigators uncovered cases where traffickers used the diversity visa lottery and even arranged marriages to smuggle people under false identities. Advocacy groups estimate as many as 1,500 Nepal a year are trapped in these schemes. Verification adds another layer of concern. Nepal still lacks a reliable digital passport system. Records are scattered, making it easy for bad actors to slip through. U.S. officials warned that without stronger infrastructure, fraud will only grow.
Critics, however, push back.
They argue most Nepalis are hard-working, honest migrants. Closing doors, they say, would punish thousands of families who dream of building better lives in America. Nepal's own government insists it is taking steps to modernize documentation and crack down on trafficking networks. But Washington is impatient. Lawmakers are already discussing temporary suspensions unless Nepal proves it can secure its system. For families in Kathmandu waiting for approval or students planning to study in California, that uncertainty feels like a ticking clock.
Number 2, South Korea. Now, here's a surprise.
South Korea, one of America's closest allies, is also at risk of losing green card access in 2025. And the reason comes down to misuse of the system. In the last decade, U.S. officials tracked a sharp rise in visa overstays by South Korean nationals. Student and work visas are the biggest problem. Reports show thousands of young Koreans entered on short-term visas, then stayed to work quietly in cities like Los Angeles, New York, and Dallas. Many found jobs in Korean-owned businesses that rarely show up on official records. Another growing issue is marriage fraud. Investigations in 2024 flagged dozens of contract marriages arranged online or through immigration brokers. These fake unions designed to bypass the long residency process are now firmly on the radar of U.S. immigration databases. For Washington, this is troubling. Even allies are not exempt from scrutiny when fraud numbers rise. Lawmakers argue that if South Korea cannot control, misused quotas may be cut or even suspended. But pushback is strong. Critics say these cases represent a small fraction of millions of legitimate Koreans studying, working, and investing in the U.S. They argue that punishing the majority for the mistakes of a few is unfair and could strain one of America's most important alliances in Asia. Seoul itself has pledged to tighten oversight, expand public education on immigration laws, and share more data with U.S. authorities. Still, time is running out. Under political pressure to reduce backlogs and fraud, Washington may act first and negotiate later. For South Korean students chasing the American education dream, or families planning long-term migration, the window could be closing fast. Could one of America's strongest partners lose privileges simply because of a few bad actors? And don't blink, because number one on this list is even more shocking. It's a wealthy Gulf nation, and the fallout could change immigration politics in ways nobody expected. Number 1, United Arab Emirates.
This is the shocker.
The United Arab Emirates, home to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, now faces the risk of losing U.S. green card access in 2025. Why security concerns? Despite being a wealthy nation and a U.S. ally, reports show a rising number of Emirati nationals overstaying tourist and student visas. Some have even filed asylum claims once inside the country, often with weak or fabricated evidence. For U.S. officials, that is a serious red flag. The problem doesn't stop there. Immigration investigators warned that verification is inconsistent. Passports and background documents from the Gulf region often lack transparency. And with the UAE allowing dual citizenship and lenient residency for wealthy foreigners, Washington fears the system could be exploited as a gateway for outside influence. Add geopolitics to the mix. The UAE is strengthening ties with China and Russia, two powers currently under U.S. scrutiny. Lawmakers in Washington now see immigration from the Emirates not just as a paperwork issue, but a national security question. But critics say this would be a massive overreach. Advocacy groups argue that most Emirates applying for green cards are students, investors, and families. Closing the door, they say, would damage us, universities, businesses, and even diplomacy in the Middle East. UAE officials quietly insist that their partnership with Washington should protect them from such measures. Still, momentum is shifting. A suspension, even a temporary one, would hit hard. It would affect students preparing to study in Boston, entrepreneurs planning to invest in Silicon Valley, and families hoping to reunite after years apart. For many, the message is clear. Even the richest nations are not immune to U.S. crackdowns. So, here's the big question. If America is willing to restrict even close allies like the UAE, who's next? And that's why this list matters, because whether you're from South Asia, the Middle East, or even a wealthy Gulf state, the rules are tightening. Before you go, what do you think? Should the U.S. cut off green card access to these countries, or should there be exceptions? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this breakdown helpful, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video so more people understand what's at stake.